Welcome to Om Times TV, a division of Om Times Media and Broadcasting. What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The celestial compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. I'm Kathy Beal. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. I would refer you to my forecasts at my sites. At Om Times, I do have monthly and moon casts there. Also, my site is empowermentunlimited.net, and I have forecasts for every week, every month, and every full and new moon. And also at my YouTube channel, Professional Aquarian. A little bit of an update of what's going on in December. This is a really astrologically active month, but a lot of the activity in your life is likely to be internal and also involving communication. The reason is that we have two interplanet retrogrades this month. Mercury is retrograde as we go into the month, and it will be retrograde until the 15th. Mercury, of course, ruling what goes in and out of our minds and mouths and our communication vehicles and our actual vehicles. And then on the 6th, Mars, which rules our drive, our energy, stations retrograde. And it's going to be retrograde into February. But for right now, just know that this month it's going to be very slowly backing it through the sign of Leo, the child, self-expression. And on the 15th, it's going to be in an open flow with Mercury retrograde as it moves ahead, all of which means that by the middle of the month, when there is also a full moon in Gemini, the sign of communication, there will very likely be information that you have uncovered during the retrograde that you are now ready to do some more research about or to implement in some way. Know that, again, communication and specifically what you have believed to be true about a lot of things up for massive inflows of info. Early in the month, from like the 4th until the 7th or so, there's a massive time of revelations and clarity and new understanding and seeing things that you hadn't before and committing yourself to a new set of values. There's a huge fusion of collective action, grassroots action, re-empowering the feminine, believe it or not, going on during this. And as the Mars retrograde continues through the month, know that you're probably not going to want to be running around quite as much as you normally do during a holiday season. You're likely to be much more selective about who you are spending time with and what you're doing. And also, it could be that you're very nostalgic and you want to go back and do a lot of things that were important to you when you were really young. Look at this as a self-paced soul retrieval and know that by the official holiday season, when we get into Christmas and Hanukkah, the skies will be calming down an awful lot more. You can find more about this in my guide to Mercury retrograde at Om Times. and in my forecasts there for the month of December, the Sagittarius new moon, and as we get a little further into the month, the Gemini full moon. All these are, again, also at my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and my YouTube channel, which is Professional Aquarian. And now for the main event. I am honored and thrilled that Ramananda John E Welshons is returning. He's been a guest on my show every year that my show has been in existence. I'm fortunate to actually know him face to face in real life. He is a highly respected contemporary spiritual teacher who lectures and leads meditation courses throughout North America, also online, highly recommended. He's been a practitioner of, I'm going to mispronounce it, vipassana, mindfulness meditation, and various forms of yoga for more than 50 years. He is the author of One Soul, One Love, One Heart, The Sacred Path to Healing All Relationships and Awakening from Grief, Finding the Way Back to Joy, and When Prayers Aren't Answered. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us, Ramananda.
Thank you, Kathy. It's wonderful to be with you. Always happy to see you.
Excellent, excellent. I feel very much the same way. It's always, because of your schedule, I always ask you way in advance. And I have historically liked to talk to you during the Thanksgiving season, and it worked out this time that we're talking now. And so what have you been, I've noticed there's a theme to what you've been teaching lately.
Well, on the subject of Thanksgiving, first of all, a couple of years ago, I was working with a couple of psychologists who were focusing in on the quality of gratitude. And as part of their research, they went to see the Dalai Lama and spent, I think, 3 weeks each in meditation retreats with the Dalai Lama. And what they were basically sharing was that, in a sense, it's almost impossible to be in a state of depression or anxiety when your mind is full of gratitude. So gratitude, giving thanks, is one of the most profound tools that we have for uplifting our spirits and making life more meaningful. A lot of people tend to focus on everything that's wrong and tend to forget about all the things that are right, all the things that we have to be grateful for, and in my practice of mindfulness meditation, which the Pali or Sanskrit word is vipassana.
Vipassana, thank you. I'll get it some year.
It's tricky, but that's why we call it mindfulness in the West, because it's too confusing. But that practice is about focusing on the breath primarily. And, I had polio when I was 3 years old and almost died. And it was the form of polio that destroys the neuromuscular system that enables breathing. So I have always been very grateful for the breath. And that in itself is a place to start, that we always have this breath that sustains us all day, every day. And then, just noticing, like lately, you'll be intrigued by this, I'd say for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been focusing in the beginning of meditation practice when I'm teaching on having people notice how they feel held by our planet. That our planet has this magnetic force called gravity. And if you think you're not affected by planetary influences, just notice that if we were on the moon or many other planets, we'd be floating around in the air right now. But, our Earth holds us close. And that in itself, those two things, just noticing the fact that we're held in place by this amazing energy that our planet gives us, and that we're given life in every breath by this invisible air that the planet generates for us to breathe. So, to think about that, I mean, we've been taught in the culture to want a lot more. That's not very interesting. Gravity and breath. But after all, what would you do without them?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So, yeah, I've been focusing a lot on gratitude, thanksgiving, and forgiveness and love. And these are all qualities that I think, given what's happened in the recent past in the election and what we've been talking about for years now about the divisiveness in our culture, I think that what we all need to do is to refocus on how to come together, how to feel our inherent connection with each other. And, one of the things the Dalai Lama always likes to say is don't ever stop talking to each other, and talking in a way that is not combative or abusive, but is instructional so that you learn. If you don't agree with someone else, ask them why they feel the way they feel and try to hear it without argument at the outset, at least. Try to understand what it is that leads people to believe what they believe. And then ultimately, I think to realize that at the core, we all want the same things and we're all concerned about the same things. So the differences in our paths are really rooted in how do we get to where we want to go? How do we achieve what it is we want? And the last thing I'll say is that the Dalai Lama has this wonderful mantra that he repeats every day, all day, when he's going through his life, which is everyone wants happiness, doesn't want suffering. And that's a basic core principle that we can start with that as the thing that unites us all. We all want happiness and we don't want suffering.
So here's a sideways question for you. Have you met the Dalai Lama?
I've not met him, but I did have the opportunity to um, be with him in San Diego a few years ago, and just a extraordinary experience.
I saw him actually, I think it was in a basketball stadium at a
Uh
university.
huh.
And I swear to you, the energy in the room changed when he came through the door. Before he had made it to the stage, it shifted and everyone just looked, and
Right.
nothing had been announced.
Right.
He
Yeah.
has that much of a presence.
Yeah. I was in an outdoor football stadium with him in San Diego. I think it was San Diego State University or something like that, one of the universities out there. And yeah, there was like 20,000 people there, and he just walked out on stage, and the same thing happened. The energy shifted, and everybody kind of just quieted down. And he was his usual mixture of humorous and serious and heartful, and just amazing. A great example for all of us.
Well, and also shows you what impact one person can have. People think they don't, I think a lot of people are blind to the impact that they can make simply by walking around radiating who they really are or positive energy. I like to say, you never know, smiling at the cashier at the grocery store could set off a chain of events that ends up saving somebody's life. You have no idea.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah. And to take the opportunity whenever we can to be in the presence of someone who reminds us of that and reminds us that we all have the ability to do that. Maybe not as dramatically as the Dalai Lama, but even just a smile. as you pointed out so beautifully, Kathy.
So this is something when you teach meditation, you help people get into themselves and get quiet. There's something further than that. I know meditation has been core to your existence for decades. How does that play into what people can do now?
Well, it's an interesting thing. Meditation is one of the simplest practices you can do, but it's not necessarily easy. It's simple because all you have to do is sit and breathe and pay attention to your breath. But if you try to do that, you'll see that that can be a challenge. But what people need to remember is that you can start out gently. And there are other practices like walking meditation and meditation mindful eating and things where you're meditating while doing some activity. That can be helpful also, rather than endeavoring to just sit still. But sitting still, closing your eyes, you can have them open in certain traditions, but basically sitting still, closing your eyes, and just being with your experience of this moment right now. Um, you know, a lot of what gets people agitated and anxious is the worry about something that is going to happen in the future, and or some frustration or regret or resentment about something that's happened in the past. So that means that our minds are always thinking about the past and the future, never being right here in this moment. And this moment is usually pretty good. I mean, if you're not dragging in the things that you're worried about in the future or the things that you're upset about in the past, and you can just be alive right now, focusing on your breath, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. And that isn't escapism. It's really just a means of escaping from a mental process that's not going to help you. It's almost always invariably going to lead you to suffering. And it's generally very simple. The mind is, as one computer expert explained to me once, there's only two things that a computer really knows. It knows yes and it knows no. And that's really true of our minds too. All of computer programming is these very complex, intricate applications of the questions that are fed into the computer. The answers are yes or no to everything. It just becomes very complicated. Same with our minds. And in our minds, what we deal with is liking and disliking. So that is constantly evaluating. If I think about something that scares me, I don't like that. If I think about something that delights me, oh, I like that. But most people don't have the ability to control their mind so that they can focus on what they want to focus on. And then there's obsessive thoughts about worries, and there's obsessive thoughts about desire, and all leading us out of the moment and saying, if this happens, I'll be happy. If this happens, I won't be happy. Or if this doesn't happen, I won't be happy. So that's really it. It's learning to take the reins of our own minds. Ram Dass used to say, the human mind is an exquisite servant, but a terrible master. So meditation practice gives us the ability to start to tell our mind what to think and when to think about it. And to be able to say, I think one of the most dramatic, beautiful examples of the benefits of meditation, if you look at the times in life when you've been kept awake at night by some thought that you can't stop thinking, or feeling that you can't stop feeling, that meditation wouldn't eliminate your ability to think or your ability to feel. It would just say, now I want to go to sleep. So I'll think about that or feel it tomorrow. And if you can't stop thinking about it or feeling it, then you stop and really let it be. Let it happen. Let it flow. Feel what life feels like.
And sometimes it passes through. If you just stop, it
Exactly.
gets bigger if you try to push it away.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, one of the basic principles of Buddhist teaching is that everything is impermanent. Everything in the world of form is impermanent. Everything has a lifespan to it. It arises out of nothing. It exists for a period of time. It changes and it passes away into nothing. That includes thought. There's no thought we've ever thought that has perpetually been in our minds. I mean, sometimes you might think it is, you might imagine that it is, might feel like it is. But if you really examine it, you can see that everything is coming and going all the time.
And people grab and hold on to and fixate and make it worse. Yeah.
Uh,
It sounds to me also like you're hinting at letting go of attachment to outcome, for example, that there's a concept of attachment being a possible source of pain.
Well, yeah, in the Buddha's first sermon, he gave what came to be known as the Four Noble Truths. So the first noble truth is life involves suffering. Now, that when I say that, I always have to qualify it by saying that the Buddha didn't mean that life is miserable. It's not like that terrible bumper sticker that was popular years ago, life sucks and then you die. That wasn't his message. It was just basically, you know, that life involves suffering. That is, if you stub your toe, you're going to feel pain. If you burn your hand, you're going to feel pain. If something happens that you don't like or didn't anticipate, you're going to feel emotional pain. That's just the way it is. So he said, if you don't accept that, you can't be happy because you're always going to feel like the universe has made some terrible mistake. If I don't feel good, somebody's made a mistake. Give me a pill, give me a practice, give me something so I can feel good again. And, Buddha said then that we have inner resources, that our basic nature is peace. Our basic nature is pure awareness. Our basic nature is love and joy. Those are inherent in our being. Yesterday, I saw a photo of a child, and someone had written it, something like, if only we could keep the exuberant, curious, fascinated wonder that we had when we were children. The Buddha was saying we can because we never lose it. It's just that our mind starts getting so busy thinking, I need something else to be happy. I need this to not be happening. I need that to be happening. I need this person to act this way, you know. So the first noble truth, life involves suffering. The second noble truth is the cause of suffering is desire or clinging or attachment. That
Mhm.
means that the the fundamental principle is that if you didn't want things to be different than they are, and you didn't want people to be different than they are, you could be happy right now. So that's the problem with attachment. Being attached to your opinion about how things should be and how people should be is one of the greatest causes of suffering.
My observation, and I don't know whether you've encountered this, is that I've seen as some people age, not everyone, they go with the flow more, that their attachment to various outcomes has beaten them in the head so much that they just kinda go, "Okay, fine, whatever, I'm just gonna
Yeah,
float." And I'm in that category.
yeah,
Like, "We're
me
just gonna
too.
float."
Me
Yeah.
too. It's very interesting that, as you age, certain things become a lot less important,
Mhm.
almost meaningless. And, our problem in the culture has been that we've had this tremendous aversion to aging. And, we've grown up in a culture that thinks aging is a defeat. It's terrible. You shouldn't let it happen. You start to get wrinkles, go get plastic surgery, get Botox, color your hair, do whatever you feel you need to do. And that has bred a tremendous insecurity. And when I looked at the culture in India when I was there, it was amazing to me to find that it was the elders who were revered. Now, why? Because they actually, in that culture, have been able to cultivate wisdom. They don't fear aging. And I remember Ramdas coming back from a trip to India. He hadn't been there in a number of years, and he went, and all his old friends in India looked at him and said, "Oh, Ramdas, you've become old." And it was like they were happy about it, you know? And so it's different. I mean, I feel like my body is a little creaky and problematical, and I have to pay more attention to taking care of it than I used to. But otherwise, most of what I've encountered through the process of aging has been just relief.
Yep.
Sounds like you feel the same way.
Less and less to worry about, like, well, okay, nah, that's not important. That's not
Uh,
important.
uh,
Mhm. Yeah. As a passionate younger person who put a lot of worry and pain onto herself. Uh,
yeah, yeah, it's amazing how hormones complicate life.
or just having certain views of what should happen and then it not happening again and again, like, finally realizing maybe that's not the path.
Well, it's just fascinating to see that generally when we're younger, we're very passionate about everything, and when you see how life on planet Earth unfolds and how human beings evolve or change or don't, and how history repeats itself. I love that phrase I heard a few years ago. It said, there was the original phrase that those who do not study history are destined to repeat it.
Right.
And then that was followed by, yes, and those of us who do study history are destined to watch other people repeat it.
No argument there. This is we're at the halfway point for the show, so we're going to take a break and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Everyone just hang out. We'll be back real soon.
Times TV.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again? empowermentunlimited.net.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. I'm Kathy Beal, and we're talking today with Ramananda John E. Welshons. And I have a new question for you. You have mentioned someone a couple of times, and I think there might be a few people listening who don't know about your history with Ram Dass. And I know that you're giving right after we do this, you're giving a remembrance of him, a memorial celebration of him. He was a longtime friend and colleague of yours, right?
Yes, yes. I met Ram Dass in 1973, and I was a student in the University of South Florida in Tampa, Florida. And I was, through a very strange and miraculous path, invited to help find him to bring him there for a workshop and lecture. And he, for if anybody doesn't know who he was, or yeah, was, is he died in 2019 at the age of 88. He was a very interesting man who grew up in Boston, had a very successful father, and Ram Dass, his name was Richard Alpert, became a psychologist, began to teach at Harvard in the late 50s or early 60s, and then met Timothy Leary, and they became infamous for experimenting with psychedelic chemicals in the early 60s. And then they were invited to leave the faculty of Harvard when the publicity became too controversial. And he wound up going to India to study yoga and meditation, came back in 1968 and began traveling all over the country lecturing. And if there's one person who was perhaps most irresponsible and most influential in bringing yoga and meditation to America and making it as widespread as it currently is, it would have been him, because he really opened that door and intrigued all of us and entertained all of us. So we're doing tomorrow night a Zoom class, which people can connect through my website or Facebook page, or the links to how to sign up for that are there. And I'll just be talking about some of my reflections of him and our friendship, which lasted from 73 until 2019.
That's a remarkable period of time. I remember seeing lots of photos of you out in Hawaii with him. That's where he
Yeah,
decided
lucky
to
me.
locate.
I had a dear friend who moved to Hawaii I could go visit.
Hmm.
And he was there, he moved there in 2004. So he was there for 15 years. And in the first 10 years or so, I used to go visit him 2 or 3 times a year. And we just had wonderful times. It was so relaxed and joyful. And, he had had a very serious stroke in 1997. And so he was basically in a wheelchair after that. But his life on Maui was quite beautiful, quite beautiful. And I was so blessed to be able to share it with him.
My favorite story that I've heard you tell involves New Mexico, a truly remarkable collaboration that the two of you had with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Well, yeah, that was actually, we never were with her together. It was Ram Dass who suggested to me, when I first met him, when we brought him to Tampa in 1973, he made the statement during the lecture that he gave that he was spending a lot of time with people who were dying and people who were grieving, and that he was finding that to be the most powerful spiritual practice he'd ever come upon. And I couldn't figure that out. Now, I had had an incredibly profound experience with my mother when she was dying in 1969. But there was no context in the culture for discussing or talking about what I had shared with her during that time. So I just kind of set it aside. And when Ramdas made that statement, I went up to him afterwards and I said, "Can you explain to me what you mean by that?" And we started to talk, and I realized that this experience with my mother was really a very high spiritual experience with her getting ready to leave her body. And he had had the same kind of thing with his mother when she was dying.
Mm.
And so he had started to work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and he said, maybe you should go study with her. So he recommended that, and I wound up meeting her in 1976 in Berkeley, California, where she was headlining a big conference there. And then Ramdas he and Elizabeth wanted to open a big center like a hospice, but a thing that it was going to be a combination of an ashram and a hospice. So people could be surrounded by spiritual teachings and spiritual people while they were getting ready to leave their bodies. And it never came to pass with Ramdas and Elizabeth, but it inspired a friend of ours named Dale Borglum to
Mm.
open it in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And did you work with him there?
I did not actually work there. I visited him and we became friends. And I actually worked with Stephen and Andrea Levine. Stephen was also in that group of people that Ramdas had sent to meet with Elizabeth in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And he wound up setting up something called the Dying Hotline. So he wasn't actually running the center in New Mexico, but he also lived in New Mexico, and he was running a hotline for people who were dying and grieving, which was they could call up, leave a message with their phone number, and then either Stephen or Andrea would call them back and just talk with them. And my role was to help him set up lectures and workshops, primarily in the Northeast, that were in large part funding mechanisms for bringing money into the Dying Project and the hotline. Yeah.
Well, you have clarified a massive misunderstanding on my part. This is a great Mercury retrograde experience. I love it.
No worries. You were
So
close.
I was close. I was like in the ballpark. Um, Now you conduct meditation classes regularly, and people can attend them via Zoom. Although there are some there are some that are in a spot in Montclair, right? But let's talk about what you're doing online that people could have access to.
Sure. Well, the online classes, I try to schedule them pretty much every week, although we have certain weeks that we're off, especially during the holiday season. But we do have a class this Wednesday, and we have another one on the 18th. And then we'll start with more regular classes again on Wednesdays in January. And what it is basically an opportunity to sit with a group of people online, and which I initially thought wasn't going to be, nearly as nice as being together. And my experience has been just the opposite. I am finding these classes, which we've been doing for 4 years now, absolutely delicious. And that the meditations are just as deep as when we're a big group in person. And it allows for people to tune in from all over the country and all over the world. We occasionally have people come in from Europe and Australia and, what have you. So we do 3 meditations. As we get settled in the beginning, we'll start with a basic vipassana meditation, mindfulness of breathing. And then we'll stop and take questions and answers, and I'll give a Dharma talk, which is basically, on a certain subject about spiritual life and how to fit these teachings into our lives. Then we'll have a second meditation, and then we take a short break at the 90-minute mark, And then we come back for one last metta meditation, which is loving kindness, which we do in the last 25 minutes or so. And people can come and, be on for the first meditation or stay for the second meditation, drop off whenever they need to when they've had enough. But, I always like to encourage people to realize that one of the challenges with meditation is in our busy, hyperactive culture, taking the time to sit and actually meditate, and then to actually sit there for the time that you've set aside to do it. And the more time you put into it, like anything else, the more you get out of it. So it's a 2-hour class, Wednesday nights, most Wednesday nights. And it's a combination of talk, and nobody has to talk, and nobody has to turn their camera on if they don't want to. They can just listen. So it's basically for each individual to find what's most meaningful for them, and they stay as long as they want to, and then they go. And most people will stay till the end for the full 2 hours.
I've seen lately that the subjects of the classes are tracking topics of your books.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, the books are, the first one I wrote was Awakening from Grief, Finding the Way Back to Joy, which is basically about how to deal with those things that happen in life which are unexpected or unwanted or, unpleasant, and the things that upend our mindset about what we thought our life was going to be and who we are and what we're going to do in life. So, Awakening from Grief. The second book was called When Prayers Aren't Answered, Quieting the Mind and Opening the Heart in Challenging Times. And that book, there was a wonderful book out called When Bad Things Happen to Good People by Rabbi Harold Kushner. And it was a wonderful bestseller that's helped millions of people. But he used the Old Testament as the source of his understanding of things. And I wanted to expand that to use the wisdom of the East primarily as the source of our understanding and explaining these things that happen in life that are tragic and heartbreaking and upsetting and whatever. And to also look at how to use those experiences for spiritual growth. How can that kind of shattering of our understanding of what life is supposed to be about, how can that encourage us to go deeper in our spiritual practice? And, the answer to that is basically, what else is there to do when everything else falls apart? You've got two choices. One is to be feeling like a victim, and the other is to say, what is there in this that I can learn from and grow from? So that's When Prayers Aren't Answered. And then the third book is One Soul, One Love, One Heart, The Path to Healing All Relationships. And that is about applying the principles specifically in relationship, and not necessarily in romantic relationships, but all kinds of relationships, including romantic relationships, but our relationships with our parents, our children, our body, our culture, our neighborhood, our country, our planet, the whole thing. It all involves relationships. How do we take care of the planet we live on? How do we take care of the bodies we live in? These are all relationships. So those are the three that are currently published, and I have several others that are in various stages of incompleteness, but on their way to completion.
Oh, curious about those, and I certainly can relate to that concept.
Well, when I first wrote Awakening from Grief, I actually was spending some time with a fellow named Mark Victor Hansen, who was one of the co-creators of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series back in the 90s, which was incredibly successful. And he had said to me, we were just chatting, and he said, you need to be teaching and writing books. And I said, well, teaching I can do, but writing books, I don't know. And he said, 2 pages a day. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you could write 2 pages a day, couldn't you? And I said, yeah. He said, well, if you write 2 pages a day, in a year, you'd have over 700 pages. You know, that's so. Yeah, I think a lot of times people get intimidated by that big thing that they have to produce called a book.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just write 2 pages a day and then figure out how to merge them together, you know, you'd have 2 books in a year. That's what he said to me. I've never been able to do that, but it did, you know, sort of limit the immensity of the project so that I wasn't so intimidated by it.
But I just have this sneaking suspicion that when when the topic makes itself known to you, you just immerse yourself in it quietly and it comes to you. Just a hunch.
Yeah, and I write differently than a lot of people who, start out with a table of contents and an outline. I start with just writing what comes into my head and my heart when I have that topic that I'm sort of aiming towards. And, I just write and write and write. And, I may write the beginning of the book and, then I write the middle and then I write the end, or it might be something different. It might turn out to be, I think this is the beginning. It turns out to be the middle. You never know. But that's just my method. Wouldn't work for everybody, but it's just to, wait for inspiration to come, which often comes at about 3 o'clock in the morning, which is, that gives me an unusual lifestyle because I'm often up between 3 and 4, and I'll be up until about 6 writing. And I remember Wayne Dyer telling me that the same thing happened to him. In fact, he used to wake up when he was writing something at a specific time. I think it was like 3:54 a.m. or something. It was a specific minute that he would wake up every morning, and his inner guidance would say, get up out of bed and write. So
It would formulate itself within him and then want to come out.
yeah,
I understand that. Everyone has their own process. So
yeah.
well, I have the feeling these aren't science fiction novels that you've got brewing.
No more than it's all science fiction at some level. But no, they're I think meaningful, helpful books, I hope. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, speaking of meaningful and helpful, we do still have a little bit of time left. What are you finding useful for people right now? The people you're coming into contact with, the ones who show up in your meditation classes. Is there any kind of different slant to the information you're feeling they need at this point?
Well, I think that at many levels, we're getting a big dose of the fact that things aren't the way we thought they would, and that I'm actually sort of subtly, because I don't want to freak people out, but I'm subtly using the principles that we learned over the years from working with people who have cancer. That is basically, we're all mortal. We're all going to die, and we don't know when. So when things happen in the world that are reminding us of that mortality and making us anxious, it's one of those opportunities where we can say, I will take the spiritual teaching from this, and it's interesting, Kathy. I might have told you this story before, but about 30 years ago now, I was going through a really difficult time. I'd already been meditating and practicing yoga and spiritual teachings for over 20 years. I went through a really difficult time in life where it was like everything fell apart. And I was lying in bed one morning and I was thinking, this couldn't be worse. It's just terrible. The worst thing that could ever happen was a series of things. And finally, I just heard a voice say, "Well, you're alive." And I lifted my head up and I looked around and I said, "Yeah." And then the voice said, "And you've got a roof over your head." And I said, "Yeah." And you ate yesterday. Yeah. And look out the window. And I looked out the window. It happened that I was living next to a river with a waterfall right outside my window. And this voice said, "Go look out your window and see how beautiful it is." And I did that. And, that started me on a path of adding something to my morning meditation, which I now have done every day for 30 years. And that is to take a moment during the meditation to say to myself, today could be my last day on earth or the last for someone I love. In light of that, how do I want to spend it? What do I want to fill my mind with? Do I want to be loving and kind or cranky and selfish? Do I want to be generous? Do I want to be withholding? And the answers come very quickly. We want to be in the states that bring happiness, and happiness is brought by kindness, generosity, connection, love, and so it gets everything in focus, and then the day is much different. And it's interesting that our society encouraged us for so many decades to not think about our mortality. And what I've learned is it's thinking about our mortality that helps us to be fully alive,
Mhm.
because it's a reminder this could be our last day, and you can become a nervous wreck about that, or you can say, yeah, in light of that, if it was my last day, what do I want to feel? What do I want to do? What do I want to say? What do I want to sing? How do I want to dance? Whatever those elements are, I think are really, really enhanced by just spending a few moments, like the old Carlos Castaneda book back in the 1970s, where um, Don Juan, the Native American wise man in the books, was always teaching Carlos by reminding him that he was mortal. And he said, you don't have time. You think you have time. That's an illusion. You have now, this moment, right now. Comes back to Ram Dass's teaching when he first came back from India. Be here now.
I had that thrown in my face at a work meeting when I was an attorney.
Oh
My
my
boss,
goodness.
my boss said that to me. I was like, anyway, yeah. So that's been in my thinking for a long time. Don't you also have a particular approach when you say goodbye to someone?
Well, that is, rooted in the same thing. It's like I
Mhm.
say to myself, we may never see each other again. So let's have a really good hug. And if it's appropriate, let's have a really good kiss. And, look in each other's eyes and just appreciate who we are every day. You can't imagine how that makes life different. And you could say, well, if I thought about that, I'd be depressed. That's what the culture has told us. But
Mhm.
it's not true. If you think about that, you come alive. And you're not looking like, so many people I think are saying, I'll get around to it later. You know, we'll make our relationship good later. I'll, be loving later. I'll be kind later. We'll enjoy life later. No, this is it. Today's the day. Now, I've been thinking about it for over 50 years, putting it into practice for over 30 years, and I haven't died yet. Could happen tonight. I don't know. But, I have had an extraordinarily amazing life, and I'm very grateful for it.
And I am very grateful that you have shared your time with us. Could you please tell people where they can find you online? What's the name of your website?
Uh, JohnWelshons.com. You can see it down there in the corner of the screen, I think, but JOHNWELSHONS.com or onesoulonelove.com. And I'm on Facebook. I'd invite people to join me on Facebook if you like. That's where I really, keep people abreast of what I'm doing. And I have a weekly newsletter that I send out if you'd like to be on the mailing list for that. Just send me an email at johnwelshons@earthlink.net, EARTHLINK.net. And we'll add you to the email list, and you can keep in touch and find out where I am and what I'm doing.
And I challenge everyone. I invite you, but I challenge, take a meditation class. It will be the most grounding experience you have ever had. John is he's just terrific at leading meditation. Just absolutely terrific. So
sweet of you to say that, my dear.
well, it's true. Thank you. And I'm really grateful that you spent time with us. I always love talking with you. And thank you very, very much. I look forward to whatever your next book is going to be. Everyone, stay calm, find grounding, find your points of joy, and talk to you again in a couple of weeks. And bye all.